Welcome to the Half Yard Line. I am Tim.
And I am Luke.
And Luke, AFC NFC Championship Sunday, one of my favorite football weeks of the year, has been in the books, as they say. Here as we say, they also maybe sometimes say it. I will say this, that we got 1 out of 2 for the fandom here in and certainly by far the one that was more important to me, though next week becomes really important for Kansas City for reasons we'll discuss in a moment. But Lamar and the Ravens, and their after an incredibly undisciplined game, heading for the highway. Actually, I guess probably the local roads. They didn't have to go too far.
I was going to say it's probably more of a state road situation, given how close they are. But
be a fun flight back to Kansas City this evening for Taylor Swift and her contingent of Chiefs fans. And then unfortunately, the DFI downtrodden elite of the Lions had a DFI game, if there ever was one to be had. And are also going home.
Yeah, a Hall of Fame effort in defeat from the Lions in terms of ways to make your fan base as miserable as humanly possible, pretty much.
Not even really a fan, and I'm miserable after that game.
Yeah, I mean, I was bummed. Watched the second half of the game, but we'll get to that in a minute. As you say, Tim, here we're recording this for the information of you, dear listener, straight after the Niners-Lions game has finished. So we are hot off the presses here for once, rather than being, late to the party as we usually are with our considered takes. We are hot on the stove, as I'm sure someone has said at some point for the pod here tonight. So forgive us for our steaming hot takes of raw emotion, but hey, something different here on Half Yard Line. What's not different is our socials handle, which is still at Half Yard Line Pod, or our email address, which is halfyardlinepod@gmail.com. This is really nearing the home stretch of the pod. We got this week. We'll do a Super Bowl preview for you fine folks next week, and then a wrap up once the Super Bowl ends, and then that will be that. So get in touch with us on those methods of communication if you are so inclined. Be great to hear from you in the next couple of weeks. Tim, speaking of people that are about to have a lot more time on their hands, let's start with the Baltimore Ravens, who lost in the AFC Championship game at home as the 1 seed to the evergreen Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Andy Reid triumvirate. As you mentioned, I feel like Taylor Swift is, entering into perhaps maybe even bolstering the championship credentials of this team. I will say one quick thing on that. We don't really talk about the Swift thing because a lot of it is just random sports talky crap about, Travis Kelce's distracted. Yeah, whatever.
I think his brother that was the problem.
The instances of people complaining about Taylor Swift outnumber the sightings or mentions of Taylor Swift on any NFL programming by a factor of about 350 to 1 by my unofficial count. I spent a whole game or after the game just quickly scrolling Twitter for some nuggets, and so many people, oh God, now we're just going to have to hear about Taylor Swift all the time. It's like, I don't actually remember her name being used in the entire broadcast apart from at the end. So
occasionally they throw a camera view to her, just like they do Brock Purdy's parents, just like they do
Christian McCaffrey's dad was another one that they used.
What are we talking about? The guy's girlfriend, and she's famous. Of course, she's the most famous
woman. If he was going out with Oprah Winfrey, I'm fairly sure they would cut to Oprah Winfrey as well. Although that would obviously be somewhat more.
That would be interesting for different reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
His grandmother.
But anyway, yes, we will swiftly, no pun intended, move off that particular subject. It was 17-10 Kansas City. It was a throwback kind of game, AFC Central-ish affair between these two teams. Tim, what did you kind of take away from the Chiefs punching their ticket to yet another Super Bowl in the Mahomes era in Baltimore?
The thing I texted you after that game ended was, it always was, wasn't it? I mean, it was always going to be Kansas City, and we rewrite the script throughout the year so that it's interesting and so that it's neat, and we feel some reason for us to play 17 games across 32 teams. Yeah, but it was always going to be Kansas City, and it probably will be for the foreseeable future until Kansas City gets to the point where, and this is where Tom Brady never got, and I don't get the same for Patrick Mahomes. We can talk about the game in a minute, but Tom Brady was such a creature of habit and loved the process of football, not the game, the process.
Maniac is the word you're looking for. He's a maniac.
He loved the process of doing football. He liked going to training camp. He liked the practice. He liked the meetings. He liked the film. he thought of every single play almost like, this is a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad analogy, but during World War II, Nazi doctors did absolutely terrible experiments on people. Just seriously, it was absolutely abhorrent things that you would never imagine.
I dread to think how this metaphor propped up in your head, but yeah, please go on.
Just follow with me. I may or may not have watched a documentary this weekend.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But they approached those experiments with like a detachment about what they're doing, right? And you're sort of psychotic, right? There's this, you're not really in your brain. And I think that's how Tom Brady handled football, right? Tom Brady was almost not in his brain when every play was almost this experiment. Like I'm going to find the thing and I'm going to do the thing and then we're going to do the thing again. He was never emotional about it. Except for when he was doing it poorly. And again, terrible analogy, neither here nor there. My point is Mahomes loves to play football. He likes backyard football.
Yeah.
He throws off. Yeah. I mean, he had a pass in this game, which I could only describe as monkey in the middle. Like he just tossed it right over the guy in the middle's head and just and it was perfect for the situation. And it's not the first person to lob a pass over a guy's head, obviously. But Tom Brady's not throwing that ball. Tom Brady's not that you don't have a single chest pass in Tom Brady's repertoire.
Yeah, well, I think it's just a very different style of quarterback play, as you mentioned, right? It's certainly more fun to watch. Tom Brady was, this is massively underselling his incredible achievements and ability, but it was like a mechanic, right?
Yeah.
The thing needs to go, cog A goes on axle B. I don't know anything about mechanical engineering, as you can tell, but it was very much like put the block in the space that the block goes in. Whereas Mahomes is like, instead of that, I'm going to put this block in the other way and it's going to fit in this different hole and we're going to kind of make something crazy out of it. So it's a bit more of an artistic approach, if you will.
And the reason I bring it up isn't because I hate Tom Brady and I like Patrick Mahomes. It's because I don't think those two things necessarily go together. Like the maniacal love of the process and the kind of the backyard, let's have fun with this. And I wonder if there's Tom Brady played football till he was 45 years old. Here's your hot take. I don't think Patrick Mahomes plays football till he's 45 years old. I don't know that he plays football till he's 40 years old. Because I think at some point Patrick Mahomes is going to go, I don't need to do this anymore. Like if he legitimately keeps playing the way they're playing now, if they're really just the best football team in football every year, week 1 through 8 are just obnoxious. Like I just have no desire. It just hurts. I don't want to be out here. I could be anywhere else. It's not cold yet. There's stuff to do. And then the rest of the season is like, okay, now we got to get into the playoffs. Once we're in the playoffs, now we're going to win everything. Oh, look, we won the Super Bowl again. And you talk about Patriots fans during their run, and winning the Super Bowl was not even all that fun anymore. It was almost a relief.
It's like the agony
thank God.
A lot of top sports people say this, right? Like the agony of defeat is so much more acute than the joy of winning. So it almost becomes, and I think, again, I've referenced this book several times, but It's Better to Be Feared, the Seth Wickersham book about the Patriots dynasty, talks about this a lot. It's more like, I just want to avoid that happening. Like you win and it's awesome. And for the 10 minutes after the game has ended and the confetti's on you and you go to the locker room and whatever, it's fantastic. But I think where, the Belichick-Brady axis changed, football in such a tremendous way was that it was, like you say, almost like, okay, thank God that's over. Now can we go and do it again? And just kind of staving off the inevitable. Yep. Now, whether Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs continue to do that, who knows? Obviously, don't imagine it's coming to a close anytime soon, but you never know. Andy Reid might do the same thing and say, do you know what? I'm a Hall of Fame coach. I've won a hell of a lot of games. I've had a second act in my career that very few top coaches ever really get. And not only have I had a second act, I've done it to a phenomenal level of success. It's hard to know. It'd be interesting to see what happens if they're ever actually bad. I mean, people spent a lot of this season saying, "Oh, the Chiefs look terrible," and they did look bad for stretches of the season, right? Cobbled it together.
Did they look bad, or did they not look as good as you expected them to?
Yeah, they looked un-Chiefsy. I mean, if you put together the kind of very notable, famous end of game botches by the wide receivers that cost them 3 games, then they would have won 14, and you go, well, it was more of the same.
Terrible. They're so terrible. Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people spent time talking about it, and so it's they've had to do it in a different way, play on the road, etc. But certainly the juggernaut of the AFC,
the playing playoff games on the road really tripped them up.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe if we pivot away from the philosophical more into the nuts and bolts on this one, it was a pretty ugly way to win a game if you're the Chiefs. Baltimore, best defense in the NFL, and put up almost no resistance out the gate. The Chiefs looked like they were just going to keep rolling on through, score all the time. It was not to be. They were shut out in the second half, having scored, I think, a touchdown on each of their first 2 drives. So of the 17 points they amassed, 14 of those came on the first 2 drives. Kelsey was getting open seemingly at will. They were running the ball very effectively. Just seemed like the Chiefs were in a groove, if you want to use that kind of phrase. And it was like, well, Baltimore's a good team, but hey, they're coming up against this guy, P. Mahomes and T. Kelsey and A. Reed, and they can't deal with that. But as I mentioned,
then the
offense for the Chiefs kind of went in the tank, or the Baltimore defense stepped up, depending on how you want to look at it. I mean, Mahomes at halftime was 20 of 25. He finished 30 of 39 for 241 yards and a touchdown, which is, it's pretty good for anyone who's not him. But they only averaged 2.8 yards per carry on the ground. They did stick to the run. I think they had 32 attempts. But really the story of this game to me, the Chiefs found a way. It was muddy. They got the play at the end to MVS. It wasn't really a great game from the Chiefs, but they did just about enough. That's sort of the be-all, end-all. To me, and you may agree with this, I don't know, this is so much more about the Ravens in terms of the narrative of this game and how I saw it unfold, because I didn't think at any point, apart from the first couple of drives, the Chiefs were ultra impressive. I mean, on offense, certainly not. Defense, they were locking guys up pretty well, but I found this very confusing to watch on the Ravens side, and you and I were texting about it during the game. It was a strange game offensively from the Ravens, kind of across the board. It didn't ever seem that they got a handle on how to play it. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like they are a team that is so effective running the football and has been for ages, right? We said it on last week's podcast. I mean, in total, the 2 running backs who touched the ball in this game, which was Gus Bus and Justice Hill, had 6 carries in total in 60 minutes of football. Lamar had 37 pass attempts, and I don't really understand how or why you would arrive at that kind of game planning strategy if you're the Ravens, who have been such a good running team and are not triple underlined, a drop back passing game centric offense. They can do it. Lamar's been good doing it this year, but it's not about just that drop back throw. And in this game, I just found it so bizarre that they didn't hand the ball off basically at all. You just so rarely see that. And we speak a lot about teams that get
Kansas City's rush defense, not good.
Exactly. That's the other thing. The pass defense of the Chiefs is great. They've got an all-pro slot corner. They've got an all-pro level outside cornerback. Justin Reed had a great game at the safety. He's had a good season for them.
Yep.
This is a front that likes to rush the passer. Why don't you take advantage of that and run? And the Ravens just decided to not do it. And we just finished my thought. Like, we speak a lot about teams in the playoffs losing sight of who they are, or getting jumpy, or changing their identity, or losing the plot a bit. We spoke about it with the Niners against the Packers when they edged that win. Even though they won that game, they got away from what got them there, and I felt like that's exactly what the Ravens did. And I just found it a baffling watch on the offensive side of the ball, because I was thinking, like, where are the plays that you run all the time? They just seem to vanish into the night air, and instead Lamar was launching it 50 yards down the field every time he dropped back.
Look, yes, but also no. And I guess what I mean by that is, if the team that loses the game sticks to their identity, right, and they lose, we go, same old. Look, you got to adjust. They took away what you wanted to do, and you didn't adjust. If they try to do something different and they lose, we go, I should have stuck with what you're good at. So I can see both sides of it. But no, hang on. Let me prove your point for a moment.
Sure.
Gus Edwards, in his 3 whole carries, averaged 7 yards a carry.
Gus Bus.
They only threw 7.4 yards per attempted pass. And that doesn't account for sacks. So a running play was as good as a passing play. And you add Lamar's runs in there. He was averaging 7 yards a carry. Now that's a little bit different thing, because right there off schedule, there's
some scrambles.
Whatever. Yeah. But listen, Baltimore did not play their best game. I do think they got caught up a little bit in the narrative, if that's fair. If you think about them all year, they have 2,661 rushing yards and 3,635 passing yards. So relatively, for the modern NFL, even Steve. Certainly more passing yards than rushing yards. That happens.
2,600 rushing yards is just for reference to
bonkers.
People listening out there, is a lot. That is a lot.
Yeah, it's insanity. I don't have I can probably pull it up here while we're talking. I don't have the sort of comparison points, but it's huge. And so to go away from that in the game, to me, it was almost like they'd read Lamar's press a little bit. And it was like, oh, we got our MVP quarterback. We got to ride him to a Super Bowl. This is his chance at redemption. He had an up and down game last week that happened to have 4 touchdowns in it. And we always over-index touchdowns, right? If he'd thrown for 500 yards and 0 touchdowns, that would have been a better game than throwing for 2 and running for 2. He just happened to be the guy who got the touchdowns in that game. And so everybody was talking about how, oh God, Lamar had a great game. But there were times in that game when he didn't look as good. He looked a little off the first half of that game. He didn't want to get off the spot, or it was all parallel to the line. I think they talked about it today on the broadcast. If Lamar's moving forward and backwards, things are good. If Lamar's moving side to side, things are bad. And he did a little of the side to side in the first half last week, and then they made the adjustments and came back and won the game. And more power to him. I don't mean to take anything away from Lamar's performance last week, but it felt a little bit like they were trying to drill that kind of Lamar's redemption story. And you can't call plays for anybody's redemption story. So I see that point of it. What I thought was really interesting about this game, and you mentioned at the beginning, there's not a whole lot we like more on the half-yard line than a good drive chart. And this game had a great drive chart. I mean, so the 49ers, the 49ers, they played in the other game. The Chiefs.
Yeah, they did.
Touchdown, right? Can't start much better than that.
Flying out the gates.
Punt, and then a 2-minute drive for a field goal. So good for there. Punt, end of game. What? This is because you're right. After touchdown, you're going, all right. The Ravens defense just doesn't quite have it. And Kelsey looked like old Kelsey. And by old Kelsey, I mean the not yet old Kelsey, the one the other one, the younger one.
You.
Yeah. Like he was running quasi. I mean, we joke about he doesn't really run routes. I mean, like he runs to where the defense isn't, and then cuts off to where they can't get in between him and the ball, and then they throw him the ball and he runs for a while. It was vintage Travis Kelsey. He was looking great. Because he was looking great, the rest of the team was looking great. Mahomes was looking great, and you're like, this team is gonna score every time they touch the ball. And then they go 7 plays, 20 yards, and turn the ball over on downs. And I am not a big believer in momentum. I just not. I don't think it's a thing. You are a big momentum guy. You know, as soon as the 49ers scored to go only be down by 7, you're like, it's a game over. We'll talk about that game. You were not right. They lost the game, but the game was not over at that moment. Matter of fact, the game was very much alive when they had the ball.
Anyway.
We'll talk about that game in a minute. Point is, I did think it was interesting that they got I thought a tough spot, though. The commentating crew came back and said, no, he really was short on 3rd down, and maybe he was.
Yeah, on the Pacheco run, right, for the 3rd down.
Well, the Pacheco run was definitely short. The Kelsey one is the one I think they got robbed on. But and listen, in the regular season and half the time in the postseason, I think you get that spot. Half the time you don't. They didn't. They run it up the middle with Pacheco on 4th down. They don't get it. Yeah. All of a sudden, the Ravens are going the other way. Hard to say it's much of a momentum killer because Baltimore then went 5 plays and punted, but the Chiefs never did anything else with the ball. And I do think sometimes when you kick yourself in the teeth like that, you can't help but get in your own head a little bit. And there seemed to be some of that. Now, to your point, I'm sure Baltimore, people who are better at defensive football analysis than I am will tell you what Baltimore's changes were. One, I'll tell you, Kelsey was not in the second half what he was in the first half. A lot of Kansas City's wide receivers were having a hard time getting open. There were a couple of drops. The running game wasn't quite as good. Everything was just not quite as good. And so you had, 3-play punt, 3-play punt, 8-play punt, 3-play punt, 7-play punt, 3-play punt, 6 plays end of game. That's a really bad half of offensive football. I mean, I was talking to you. I think I texted you middle of the first quarter. This one may be a barn burner. And you said, I think it's probably going to slow down. There were 3 points the rest of the game. It was 17-7 in the beginning of the second quarter. And then one field goal the rest of the way. This is the MVP starting quarterback. And Patrick Mahomes combined for 3 points in a half of football.
Yeah.
say what you want about defensive adjustments. These are two really good offenses who scored a lot of points this year.
Yeah.
And they didn't score any in the second half of this football game. And there's a lot there to unpack that if we had a 7-hour podcast, we probably couldn't get to the end of.
Yeah, you say that it's two good offenses. I mean, the Chiefs, despite their woes, have still been very effective, right? Can still score a lot of points, as we've seen. The Ravens, blew a lot of teams apart during the season, and Lamar's going to win the MVP. But two very good defenses, right? They were 1 and 2 in a lot of different categories. Showed their mettle in this game. I think you're right. Defensive excellence is always harder to see on a telecast because you really need to see the full field. You see the occasional kind of all 22-ish replays on the broadcast, but that doesn't really give you the picture as clearly. So it's always more difficult to see. I mean, one player maybe I'll highlight, and we were messaging about it during the game, is Kyle Hamilton in this game who has come on like gangbusters this year, was an all-pro, was a phenomenal talent coming out of Notre Dame and kind of tumbled in the draft because safety's not a premium position. Was just outstanding. I mean, played pretty much as well as you can play. There was one drive in particular where the Chiefs went 3 and out, and Kyle Hamilton had a direct impact on all 3 of the plays not working in a row, which is pretty remarkable. And I think what they did second half, to your point, Kelsey, I think, had something like 9 catches in the first half, I think it was 9 catches in the first half, and then he ended up with 11. So they clearly prioritized stopping him. And a lot of that was, let's put Kyle Hamilton in his vicinity. He's younger, he's faster, he's long. That's the other thing that I was going to say about the Ravens on the defensive side and why the Chiefs struggled to get open. I mean, we know the receiving core isn't all that and a bag of potato chips. Rashee Rice has some skills, but is still very young in his career. What the Ravens have been good at for a long time, and it's really jumped to the fore this year under Mike McDonald, is that physical cornerback play that you kind of don't see anymore by most teams because they're so worried about getting flagged. Marlon Humphrey was back for this game, which is obviously big. They prioritize length and strength in the corners. A lot of guys look for short, fast guys. These guys want long, athletic, and strong and powerful guys out wide. So it just makes it so hard to get open, especially when you've got a guy like Hamilton who can roam all over the field and cause you a lot of problems as you try and diagnose defenses. But yeah, to your point, hard to look at without looking at the all 22 to give the full picture there. I mean, just on the Lamar stuff, I mean, you mentioned it didn't play very well. I mean, really the almost the be all end all of the Ravens offense in this game was 2 long bombs to Zay Flowers, one of which was on a broken play and one of which was on a blown coverage. That was, the vast majority of their yardage output from a passing standpoint in this game. The end zone pick he threw was really as bad as you'll see. And we are not a Lamar hater podcast, right? We're not saying, oh, he's just a running back like people used to say. He's had a great season. I mean, I
hate Lamar, but for different reasons.
But that's because you're a Steelers fan, right? I mean, I don't like the Ravens either, but he's played great. I mean, it's one of those throws that you watch happen when the camera pans to where the receiver is and you see the defensive back catching the ball and you think there must be a reason he's thrown this ball because there are 3 defensive players standing there, and then that was one where you watch the replay and you go, nope. There was just
did you see the replay of him when they gave him the tablet?
Yeah,
I mean, he was like, oh, blah, 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 blah.
The funniest, it did give me one of my favorite highlights of the season, honestly, which was when they showed the replay. Isaiah Likely, who gets past his guy, throws up the Randy Moss hand, like, "Hey, I'm open, Lamar." It's like, you're double covered, and there's a safety rotating over. It's like, I appreciate that's probably not why Lamar threw the ball, but I was like, I do love it when guys do the wave, and it's like, nah. Odell did it later in the game. He's like, he did the wave because he's Odell Beckham, and then obviously he's not as fast as he used to be, so the corner just caught up to him and broke the play up. It's just quite funny. But I guess one kind of wider note on the woes of the Ravens in the playoffs. They've had several disappointing losses. I mean, losing to the Chiefs in and of itself, even though you're at home and you're the ones who can be classified as acceptable. If you're going to lose in a playoff game against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in this era, you'd probably go, listen, they've got most people, so we can understand it. I mean, scoring 10 points at home is not the way, but this was Baltimore's lowest points output of the entire season in the biggest game. And, these things happen. Football can be varied and can be random, and you have a stinker or whatever. You can explain it away. Zay Flowers obviously fumbles the ball over the goal line. There are circumstances that you can say, well, listen, we didn't score as many points as we would like, but X, Y, Z things happened.
Sure.
However, all 4 times that the Ravens have been to the playoffs with Lamar as the quarterback, they have turned in their season low in points in the playoffs. So 4 different times they've been to the playoffs with Lamar Jackson as the quarterback. And in each of those 4 playoff runs, appearances,
losses.
During one of the games, they have turned During one of the games, they have turned in their season low in points, which I found a shocking number. Now, when he was young and when he first broke onto the scene, and they had the very famous game against the Chargers, when the Chargers just set out with like 8 defensive backs because he wasn't very comfortable in the pocket yet, you could say, understandable, right? There was this newfangled offensive thing with this electric quarterback, and someone found a way. But since then, he's won the MVP once. He's going to win it again. He's been the 1 seed once. He was the 1 seed here again. And the Ravens have turned in another season low points total in a playoff game. Now, like I said, if it happens once, you go, okay. Happening 4 times, so 100% of the time you've turned up in the playoffs, when you've been eliminated, it's because you've scored the lowest points you've scored in that season. So whether that's defensive coordinators figuring you out, whether that's you getting tight and unsure of what you're doing, or whatever, I found that a notably kind of surprising statistic.
It's really interesting. I'm sitting here trying to play devil's advocate a little bit and think, are the playoffs generally lower scoring? You do hear defense matters more in the playoffs. You're playing better defenses in the playoffs,
sure,
playing better teams in the playoffs.
Season low. I mean, you've played 17
I hear you. Right. No, I got you.
In this day and age, and you've managed to score more than 10 points every single time.
Here's the real question, right? If in the grand accounting of 2023 / playoffs 2024,
yeah,
Lamar Jackson's season was. Is he good? Is he so last offseason? There was a lot of we were in this contract thing, right? He'd been hurt 2 years in a row. The Ravens had missed the playoffs, or made the playoffs and then not had him available. He had not played well at times. He had played very well at times. There was a lot of debate among people, particularly when he was holding out for Deshaun Watson money, right? I want a guaranteed contract of $260 million. And the Ravens reasonably said, you're insane. And he didn't have an agent. And so there's back and forth. And what is he doing? And does he know what he's talking about? Is he any good anyway? Do you want him?
It was a saga.
If he's on the free agent market, would you want your team to sign him? And some teams were like, well, yeah. And some teams were like, no, I wouldn't want him. He's terrible. And so there was this debate about what is Lamar Jackson. And so, all right, fine. He got his money. He came in. I believe will win the MVP. It's not done yet, but presumably he's going to win the MVP.
Yeah, he will win the MVP.
So he's had an MVP season. He took his team to the number 1 overall seed. They won a playoff game. They lost in the AFC Championship game to Patrick Mahomes. It's a good year, right? But at the same time, is that old monkey on Lamar's back there still? People said after last week it was off, and I thought, I'm trying to remember who it was. Might have been, it was an ESPN guy. Doesn't matter. One of the commentators on ESPN mentioned, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because he doesn't do it next week. We're going to ask the same questions.
That's very true.
And so if you put the totality of work together, it's very hard to say, this was a spectacular year of course it was a spectacular year for Lamar. Does Lamar feel that way about it when they come out? What mentally does Lamar go, that's a great year, we came up 1 game short? Or does he go, not again?
I mean, I've got to think it's the latter, right? Because really, individual awards are great, and I'm sure he'll find some solace in, hey, I won the MVP, and that's great, right? It helps you with a lot of individual accolades. But if you're him or people who are on teams as good as the Ravens are, it's Super Bowl or bust. Like, if you don't win the Super Bowl, I mean, if you don't even participate, that's one thing, right? But you got to at least get there and have a chance to win. I mean, if you look at the Super Bowl hangover statistics, obviously a lot of teams that get there lose, then don't even get back. But
right,
I think if you're the Ravens, it's a failure. You were the 1 seed. You're the best defense in football. Your best defense in football held the mighty Chiefs to 17 points, including shutting them out in the second half. And you're at home. Wild. And you lost.
Yep.
So it's a failure. Like, ultimately, individually, was it successful? Yes. As a team, which is much more important because that's what people really care about, it was a failure.
Well, if wins and losses are a quarterback stat, his playoff record, he went 1-1 this year. He went 1-1 this year.
It's not good. And they've been upset before. Yeah, and they've been upset at home before, obviously. And it's it's a whole conversation which we are now going to have to hear about for the entire off season. So we will leave you fine people in those in the care of sports talk for the next 6 months until the next or 9 months till the next NFL game to talk about that. But the Chiefs won. Congrats to the Chiefs. I don't think there's much more to say about that game, but they won it, and now they're going to go play. Yes, and now they're going to go play in Las Vegas, and they're going to play against him. Not, as we on the podcast entirely hoped and prayed and begged, the Detroit Lions. They're going to be playing the number 1 seed, San Francisco 49ers, who beat our beloved downtrodden franchise stalwarts 34-31. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you will have watched the game. But for those that didn't, Detroit, 17 points lead at halftime in this game, and they lost.
Yeah, I said to you, I think when it was 14-0, I said, Luke, I like this, but I worry about that wild card game. And kind of how they scored all those points in the first half, and you thought, oh, they're going to run away with this thing, and they ultimately won the wild card game, but it got much closer than it needed to be at the end, and they made the plays they needed to make. I am not, by the way, and I want to go ahead and have this debate with you. I do not believe this game was over when San Francisco tied it at 24. The game was very much still up in the air. And the sports talk realm, all the people are going to talk about tomorrow, and so we should at least talk about it a little bit, is should Dan Campbell have gone for fourth down on every opportunity
Twice.
he had to go for fourth down. And so you have the one at the end of the half where he kicked the field goal. You have the one when they're still in the lead, could have kicked a field goal to make it 3 scores again.
Yeah, it was longish, right? It would have been a 50-ish yarder, I think it would have been. It wasn't a chip shot.
Nope. But certainly one you expect to make in the NFL.
Yeah, you would think he would make it in the modern NFL, right? Guys have got strong legs.
And then, obviously, trailing by 3 with an opportunity to tie the game, what would have been a shorter field goal. I think they were at the 22 or something. And chose to go for it there as well, coming up short. So, let's just go ahead and chat about that for a minute. Was the game over, and what did you think about the fourth downs?
I'll start with the fourth downs. I mean, I think I actually agreed with all 3 decisions, the kick and the 2 go-fors. Now, the end of half one was tough, and I'm sure I haven't had a chance to look at like the kind of analytics output of whether it was a go or a no-go. To me, I think it's tough to turn down the 3-score lead going into halftime when you're kicking the ball away at the start of the second half. I think if the Lions had received the second half kickoff, they would have gone for the fourth down. I also feel like when it's that 3 yards, not 2, when you're around the goal line, it's so difficult to find space. To me, that one was a coin flip. I completely understood kicking it there. And to be honest, if I was the coach, I probably would have kicked it there and said, hey, this is a team that, listen, they've not had a lot going on right now, but they can score a buttload of points very quickly. Let's extend it to 3 scores. We're kicking off. If we can stop them on the drive, then we get the ball back. We've been running hot on offense. We score some more points. We just keep them at arm's length, and make them chase the game, which San Francisco does not like doing, generally speaking. So I actually like that. As far as the 2 fourth and I think they were both 4th and 2, if I'm not mistaken, right? Where they were both in field goal range.
Yep.
Obviously, Twitter and I'm sure all of the radio and TV tomorrow will be full of people who are absolutely certain it was the wrong thing to do because they knew the outcome, which is obviously the wrong way to look at it. I liked going for it both times on the basis, frankly, of you've done this all year. We just spoke about it with the Ravens, right? Dance with the one that brung you. If you're the Lions and suddenly your coach starts kicking 50-yard field goals instead of going for 4th and 2 like he has all year, no. As we always like to say, quoting the great Greg Easterbrook's Tuesday morning quarterback column,
wins don't come in the mail.
Don't come in the mail. So I just don't have any issue with doing that. I did have an issue with calling a pass play twice. That was my question. Now, the second time they ran a mesh, which is like the most obvious man beater play in the history of NFL football, and everyone runs it all the time, and it usually works where the 2 guys run a drag and one overlaps the other and the guys get lost in the shuffle. Greg Olsen pointed it out brilliantly on the telecast, where he showed that San Francisco looked like they were in man coverage and then they weren't. So when you run that concept, you've just running into
I still think there was enough room between the guy going to the left and the linebacker.
Yeah. Was it a completable part? Yeah, you'd probably say you could have completed it, right?
He was dead once he rolled right, though. There was nothing over there.
And the other one was just it was a drop. Right, Goff, he didn't have the first read open. He held it. He had to throw it on the move. It was a good pass. Josh Reynolds didn't catch the ball. I would have liked to see them run the ball on one of those 2 downs. I mean, they ran it so successfully all game long. I do think there is kind of maybe getting too cute on that play calling aspect, but I agreed with going for both of them. I don't know if you disagree with that, but I feel like you're the underdog. I especially like it when you're the underdog, and I generally like going for 4th and short most of the time anyway. So did you think any of those 3 were... I know you said you may have gone for it at the end of the half, but I'm assuming you're good with the 4th and 2 calls both times in the second half.
I am. Look, at the end of the day, and I've looked through briefly, we watched the game together, but I went after and I looked, and I can't find a play that was and 4 or less that they didn't convert except those 2 4th downs. First down, second down, third down, didn't matter. If they had and 4 or less, they got a first down.
I mean, they converted a 3rd and 18, a 3rd and 12 on a draw. Like,
absolutely.
Goal line yards.
And they were playing well. If you convert those, the ball game is unbelievably. And I would have gone for the one at the end of the half. I would have looked at it as, look, I'm ahead. Let's pile on.
It's a bonus, yeah.
I'm ahead. Already got a missed field goal to my credit. I'll go ahead and chalk the field goal I'm not going to kick here up to the one that they lost. All right. And invest in my team. Say, I trust you guys. I know you got this. Because I think kicking there, and here I don't believe in momentum, but here's my conspiracy theory. I think kicking at the end of the first half made those guys worry more about going for 4th down when it came time to do so. I think if they go for it there and they get it, I think if they go for it there and they miss it, at least they know he believes in his guys. He's ready, just like he has all year. And they asked him after halftime, and he was like, if it was a little bit closer. And I hate that. Stop it.
He took a timeout and was like, you could see his face like, in his heart of hearts, I think he wanted to go for it, but he decided for once not to. But I don't think it goes into the you're a coward and you completely went into your shell kind of category.
Absolutely not. But what I do think is we worry too much about the precision in football. Blows my mind, and it blows my mind in lots of different ways. That's a whole podcast by itself. Like exactly where we spot the ball, the chains being exactly 10 yards. And look, you got to get 10 yards down the field, and the 10 yards is that white line there. No, it's probably 9 3/4 yards. It doesn't. The precision is dumb. We're just not. We can't measure it that precise. We can't spot the ball that precise. And then we get out the sticks and we try to, as if the sticks are the chains and how the links are touching. And stop it. It's not exactly 10 yards. It's not. It's just not. Every blade of grass moves a little bit one way or the other. The line, the white line it's not perfectly straight. We're not measuring with lasers out here. It's just ridiculous. But we do that with go no go. It's 2.5 yards or 2 3/4 yards. Because if it's 2 3/4 yards, are there plays?
Second and a long 2, right? They love to say a 4th and a long 2.
Are there plays that go for 2.5 yards that don't go for 2.7 yards? Yes, of course there are. The probability you're going to pull one out of your ass when you need 2.7 yards, stop it. Like it's a different repertoire of plays. Surely you're less likely to run perhaps on 2.7 than you are 2.0. Not the Lions. They run all the time on 4th and forever, but that would be a good podcast name. But Easter egg, but all I'm saying is it is, at the end of the day, I felt like not going for it early planted seeds of doubt when it was time to go for it. I think the Lions got tight, and that's the end of this. Like you're saying it's over is effectively saying the Lions are going to get tight. And I'm texting you as if I am somehow in the Lions locker room and can talk to them. Like, no, stop. Everything's fine. You're still ahead. Yeah. You still have 7-point lead. Yeah, the world isn't imploding, and you have a 7-point lead. Relax. And they didn't relax. They dropped the ball on 4th down. They didn't relax. There was a 3rd and 10 on the drive after the Niners tied the game. 3rd and 10, and I texted you. I said, remember the 3rd and 9. Remember the 3rd and 12. Remember the 3rd and 18.
And it was a good play. They called it a good play. They executed a good play.
Hit the guy in the belly.
Dropped it.
And if he completes that pass, it's a different game. Number of things. What cost them this game ultimately was when it started getting sideways, they got tight, number one. And you can't turn the ball over and drop your turnover opportunities. Brock Purdy had 3 passes this game that should have been picked off, a 4th that could have been picked off. One of them bounced off a guy's face and ends up being a touchdown for the other team. One of them is a absolute just drop. And the other one, the guy gets one hand on and doesn't finish it off. But you can't be the underdog and lose the turnover battle.
No, 100%.
and get tight when the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, I mean, I made a little mini chart. I mean, this is not official, but yeah, you mentioned a couple of them, right? The Lions were the underdog in this game, and we can get onto what I thought about the kind of snowballing effect of this game in a second, because I do think it's worth talking about. But the Lions were the underdog, so were Green Bay. Last week, we talked about so many of similar things with Green Bay. They dropped a pick six very early in the game. They had another pass that was interceptable, and they didn't. So, they missed a field goal late. Like, on such things, games turn. Here's things that the Lions did in this game. They dropped an interception on the first drive, which was a good breakup by Brandon Ayuk on a deep pass. They had an interception that you just mentioned hit Kendall Vildor in the face mask, and instead of being an interception, it wasn't incompletion. It was a 50-yard completion. The Niners scored straight afterwards. They fumbled the ball, lost the fumble. They failed on 2 4th and 2 attempts, which we've mentioned, one of which was a drop. They dropped a gimme third down conversion, which you also mentioned. And the other one, a perfect punt was executed when the game was getting a little sideways, as you mentioned. You think, great, get them down at the 1 yard line. It was a beautiful punt, exactly what you draw up. Nice and high, miles over the returner's head. Get down there, catch it, or it bounced. Get down there, catch it after the bounce. And you got them at the 1 inch from their own end line.
Yeah. I think if they'd ever touched that ball, it would have stayed out of the end zone.
And instead of that, the guy overran it, skidded into the end zone, and that's where they handed the ball back to the Niners. Instead of it being at the 1 yard line, it wasn't. So, you can't. The point is, you can't do all of those things. Like Green Bay did the same thing. It's like you are playing ultimately a team that has been proven over the course of the season to be better than you. And I would say, man for man, player for player, the 49ers have got better talent than the Lions have. The Lions have got a lot of very good players. The 49ers have got all pros all over the place. If you're playing a better team than you can't do all of those things.
Right.
They catch one interception. They don't fumble. They convert 1 4th down. Any two of those 6, 7 things goes their way.
I don't think you need two. One. Any one of them.
Yeah, one. In a game that ended up being a 3-point margin, although obviously that was, the touchdown right at the end kind of saved it. We just in terms of the snowballing effect in this game, you gave us the drive chart for the last game. Here's the Lions drive chart for this game. Touchdown, punt, touchdown, field goal.
Pretty good. Against the Niners defense.
Punt, downs, fumble, punt, downs, touchdown. And the touchdown was when the game was already gone, basically.
Yeah.
So in 4 possessions, you turned it over 3 times, and the other time you punted.
By the way, I have to say,
do the job.
No, sorry, you snowballs, and then I'll come back to that.
Yeah, sure. But in terms of the Niners, I mean, the reason I messaged you about that specifically is A, I had bad memories of the Green Bay game from the week ago.
Yep.
And B, it's with this specific team. The Niners are that team who will snowball you. That's the problem with playing against them. So if they'd scored 31 points, let's say the Niners had scored 34 points and the Lions had won this game, I feel like if you get the Niners in a jerky mode where they go like, we scored a touchdown, then we punted twice, then we scored another touchdown, then we punted, then we kicked a field goal, it's like more up and down.
Yep.
Where Shanahan has always been so good, and this offense has always been so good, is when it's on their terms. And I felt like the second this game stopped being on Detroit's terms, started being on the Niners' terms, the talent started to show. Now, listen, it turned on the fact that there were some extremely lucky plays that went their way. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't that the Niners showed this overwhelming, skill level to turn the game around, because frankly, the bomb to Ayuk that was the moment in this game where it really could have flipped one way or another. And it just seemed from that point onwards.
You mean the interception turn touchdown?
Yeah, right. The bomb to Ayuk hit him in the face mask, etc. And the problem with playing the Niners is they will start rolling downhill at you, and then that's what they've done all year long. When they've been in the lead, they've dominated teams when it's on their terms. When it's not on their terms, they've not looked very good. And in this game, you had both halves of that coin, just the other way around.
But what you've discovered there, Luke, is one of my biggest pet peeves in football. But whether you're ahead or behind, or you have the ball or you're playing defense, like, the game is played on the offensive team's terms, period. That's the team who gets to dictate the play that's run. Now, the defense can give you a look, can say, hey, I'm going to give you the run if you want it. But no, the offense dictates the terms. And the Niners were dictating the terms when they were sucking in the first half. And the Niners were also dictating the terms when they were rolling in the second half. And it's another one of these momentum things. It's another one of these sportsy words that doesn't mean anything. That being 7 points down does not allow you to dictate terms any more than being 30 points down. That when you're losing, you probably are going to throw the ball more, and when you're winning, you probably are going to run the ball more. That's no more dictating terms than it is dealing or playing with the cards you were dealt. The Lions in this game let San Francisco do what San Francisco wanted to do. It was 24-7 at the half. 24-7 at the half. San Francisco comes out and kicks a field goal. That's a win if you're Detroit.
Definitely.
Huge Detroit win. Comes back, drives all the way back down the field. It was a 47-yard drive, and they got 4th and 2 from the 28. And they go for it, and they miss it. Nothing has changed. Everything about the game is exactly like it was in the first half, except you missed a 4th down. And if you just relax, it's fine. Now, San Francisco comes back and scores a touchdown. How they score the touchdown? Let's see. The way it reads on the paper says Brock Purdy passed deep middle to Ayuk for 51 yards. I watched the game. That's not what I saw happen. I saw
that undersells what happened, I think.
Brock Purdy overthrow the football to about the 2, but it bounced off a guy's face mask, a defensive player's face mask, who had a hand on it first, by the way. And instead of intercepting it for a touchback, it bounced off his face mask up into the air. And if you didn't watch the Ravens game, Lamar had a pass batted up in the air. He caught himself and ran for 13 yards. It was almost the same thing. And Ayuk picks it out of the air. Great play by him, by the way.
Amazing play by Ayuk, yeah. Fantastic.
Keeping your wits about you to go, oh, there's a ball over there. Maybe I should catch it. But, I mean, just complete luck. And so if you're sitting there as a Detroit Lions fan, at that point, you got to go, okay, guys, relax. Everybody, take a chill pill. We're driving. Every time we have the ball, we're moving. Every time we have the ball, we're moving. We should have gotten points at the end of the last drive. We didn't. We gave up a touchdown on a fluky whatever nonsense. Yeah. It's 24-17. We're up by 7 points. Relax.
Correct.
Yep. And they hand the ball off to rookie Jahmyr Gibbs on the very first play of the next drive. And the play was a disaster from the word go.
Yeah, it was a botched play, right? Someone went the wrong way. They kind of smuggled
They blamed
it
on
his
Gibbs,
hands.
but who knows, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, that's a play, though, that Tom Brady was always big on this, and he's talked about it on a couple of his TV specials. If you were in a big moment and you turned around and your running back wasn't where he was supposed to be, there's 2 things you can do. Some quarterbacks panic and they like shove the ball at the guy, like, what are you doing? Go. And some quarterbacks go, I'm going to live to play another day. And if Goff at that point just goes, and he either scrambles and he runs or he falls down, take a sack,
you've
whatever.
Lost.
Yeah.
It's like when guys, it infuriates me as a fan when you're watching your quarterback get, being sacked, right? And announcers love, the guy escaped and he made something happen. And listen, Purdy did it a couple times in this game. Yep. Lots of quarterbacks can do this. But there are times when the play is just dead in the water. Like there's a guy hanging off your leg. There's another guy closing in. And rather than just say, hey, I'm just going to go down here, you either take a huge shot or you end up getting the ball knocked out because you're like, well, he fights for every yard. It's like, if you're losing 5 yards already,
-4 is not better. Yep.
Yeah. Live to fight another day is the exact right way to say it. And unfortunately on that play, to your point, and, we're talking about a lot of these kind of general terms. And I feel like, you say about getting tight, right? The lines got tight. Maybe that's a play where Goff, even though he has got quite a lot of playoff experience because he played with the Rams, just made a bad call. Whatever caused it, there just seems to be, and whether you believe in momentum or you don't, or you're somewhere in between, right? There was no question watching the game that the Lions seemed to be thinking that was what was happening.
That's exactly what it was.
So
100%.
So momentum is a mental thing. I agree with you 100%. If you look at the statistics, if you look at the math, if you look at all that stuff, it says, listen, momentum's not a real thing. But what momentum as a word fails to accurately summarize, right, is really the mindset of the guys who are playing, which is kind of how I feel like momentum actually is.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Because if you're a team who's getting, everything their own way, right? Like the Niners are a good example. The Niners are front run teams, left, right, and center. When they played the Ravens, when they played the Browns, they were terrible and
they
looked like crap,
trucked,
and they turned the ball over and they got beat, right? There's a thing of like, hey, the quantifying confidence, or whatever you want to call it,
right?
And the problem is, I think if you're the Lions, where this is going to be such a heartbreaker for them, is like, to your point, you had the game in your hands even when it started to go out of the way. You built the 17-point lead. You gave yourself a cushion to say, hey, we're playing one of the most dynamic offenses in football, and we can't expect to keep stopping them or them to miss field goals or whatever, them to turn the ball over. And instead, the Niners go 5 possessions in the second half. They scored all 5. And by the time the third one goes in, you're thinking, oh no, here it comes. And for a team that showed such a lot of resilience and is embodied by a resilient head coach, you would love to see them stem the bleeding and just get a stop, like get a turnover, get a negative play, force a punt. And it just never happened. And it sucked to watch because, we speak about it. Often we spoke about it last week. This team's going to be around for a long time is complete bull most of the time, right?
Yep.
There are teams that hang around for year on year on year.
Chiefs.
The Chiefs,
Niners.
The Niners are evidently that, right? The Bills to a greater or lesser extent, they're always in the mix, right?
Yep.
These last several years with Josh Allen, but it's so hard to last beyond
Titans.
a couple of years, especially once you get to a veteran quarterback age, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, how long do you keep going around? How much are you going to pay Jared Goff? Can you bring all these other guys back? What happens when Amon-Ra St. Brown has to get big money? What about Penei Sewell? Like, can you have another good draft? It's so difficult to maintain. And I just feel like for the Lions, it felt like you're on this great run. You have it in your hands, and you kind of basically fuck it up. Like, that's really what they did. It's got to be such a tough pill to swallow. And that is why, Tim, they're a downtrodden franchise, and why, despite a fantastic season culminating in an NFC championship appearance, it's the hope that kills you. It really is. And I think the whether you believe, like we said, whether it's momentum, confidence, swagger, all these words that people use to define how players are thinking, it just seemed like there were alarm bells going off for the Lions way sooner than there needed to be, and San Francisco started to get things their own way, and it just became very panicky. And once you panic against a team that's better than you, they're going to win most of the time.
Yeah. No, I mean, yes. Yeah. It was, I feel like a Dan Campbell coach team in that moment ought to be. And I do wonder, you go back to everything we've talked about, if they hand the ball to David Montgomery on the first down of that drive instead of Jahmyr Gibbs,
right?
Whether you have a different outcome. And
Gibbs goes the other way.
Gibbs has been fantastic. No shot
no
at
shade
Gibbs.
on Gibbs. Scored a touchdown this game.
He's a rookie. Yeah. He's at a team that has had no success for 50,000 years. They're in the NFC Championship game, an opportunity to play in a Super Bowl, slipping away through your fingers, and you're out there. The crowd is going crazy for the first time all game. Your 17-point lead has become 7 in 6 minutes, and you're going, okay. All right. Oh God, I gotta.
And then when you throw the chaotic play on top of that, right? There's the situation,
and then you're going the wrong way.
Football, and then you go the wrong way, and it's like, oh, give me the ball,
or Goff turns the wrong way, or whatever.
Right.
And he had time. Like once he had the ball, and listen, if we have any kids who listen who are playing football, like put the ball away. Nothing bad will come from putting the ball away. If you run into the back of your offensive lineman and fall over, but you put the ball away, your coach will go, what was that? If you run for 60 yards and you're carrying the ball like a loaf of bread out here and you fumble it, your coach is going to smack you in the back of the head and not get the ball anymore.
Yeah, and it's a bit like, it's kind of reminded me of when, you see someone fumble and the defense, instead of diving on the ball, tries to scoop and score. And then the offense.
Yep.
It's like, to your point, nothing bad will happen if you fall on the ball.
Nope.
No one's going to say, well, I mean, in the
you could have gotten up and run.
You could have gotten it. No one cares. If you have the ball,
walk the ball back over to your coach, he'll be happy. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I mean, but a couple of things maybe on the. I mean, one negative thing on the Lions front is that they haven't won a road playoff game since 1957.
Streak continues.
Tim, I prepped a couple of things about what was happening in 1957, but unfortunately on the broadcast they then obviously took my idea and then went through them all, so I won't bother to explain to you. It was Dwight D. Eisenhower's second term in office.
Yeah,
was my favorite.
My favorite was
and he still had quite a few years left. But my favorite one that I saw, which wasn't on the broadcast, and credit to my brother who texted me this, the last time the Lions won a playoff game was 4 years before construction began on the Berlin Wall.
Whoa! Also the year my father was born. So, all of those things. So it's just like, what? Wow. And, we get to figure out next year, we'll come back to the list again, and hopefully Detroit will have another opportunity to win a road playoff game. But they will not anymore this year. The Niners and the Chiefs will be playing in the Super Bowl in the most, if we had closed our eyes on week one and woken up today, unsurprising outcome. Mahomes, of course, is Mahomes. The Chiefs have been in the AFC Championship game every year since he started playing football. No reason to think he wouldn't have. Years. Yeah, you got the San Francisco 49ers who, after annihilating my Steelers 30-9 in the first game of the season, 30-7, whatever it was, in the first game of the season, looked all the world like a team. They look great last year, look great this year. They've been through 1,000 quarterbacks. Doesn't matter. They got Christian McCaffrey. They got a great defense. They've got Deebo Samuel. They've got Brandon Ayuk. They've got George Kittle. They've got. And here we are. We'll have a whole podcast next week to talk about the Super Bowl. So just very, very quickly, if you had to pick in the next 5 football seasons, so 5 Super Bowls, 10 total teams facing each other. Of those 10 teams, how many of them will be the 49ers and the Chiefs in the next 5 football seasons?
Oh, not necessarily against each other.
No. Either one. Yeah. You got how many of them will come out, either the Niners or the Chiefs?
10. So you're saying the next 10 teams, so the next 5 Super Bowls.
Correct.
Right.
5 AFC teams, 5 NFC teams. How many of the total 10 will come from this pair?
Yeah. I think fewer than we would say right now, because I just don't think it's realistic. Because people will probably be like, 6 of the 10. Well, it's like, no, that won't be the case. I would probably say no more than, I'd probably say 3 would probably be as much as I'm willing to commit to. I feel like the Chiefs have now shown that they have a sustainable model, right? Okay, Kelsey's getting older. He is the linchpin. You need to find something else to replace him, somebody else, some other people to do his job. They've traversed the current curve of, we understand football, right? Of, well, the rookie quarterback costs you nothing.
Yep.
So you're surrounded with great players. Then you get a veteran quarterback on buttloads of money. Then you have to get rid of the good players. And then the team gets worse. Or the quarterback has to be so good that he carries them. Mahomes has shown that's possible. He can do the thing. The 49ers have been in the championship game. What is it? 5? Was it 4 of the last 5, I think, or something?
I think that's right.
And they've got this tremendous array of talent.
Uh-huh.
And Purdy is young and he's not costing them any money, and he seems to be the guy for them.
Yep.
I don't think that it's realistic to say that in the next 5 years, 6 of the teams will be these 2 teams. I just don't believe that. Someone will come up, someone will come down. Purdy will turn out to suck. Mahomes gets injured. Something happens that's unpredictable, and the league doesn't roll into year on year on year on year. To me, it's the same conversation, and this is word salad, so I apologize. It's the same conversation as, well, they'll be back many, many times. When the Bengals lost in the playoff in the Super Bowl,
they'll be back.
They'll be back.
Burrow will be back.
Joe Burrow, they'll be here every single year. No, well, not on the current evidence. The Eagles last year, so much talent. And I think the Eagles is the interesting corollary to the Niners, although the Niners have had a lot more sustained success. Like, talent-wise, they've got amazing talent. But it doesn't necessarily mean that every single year you're going to be the best team. So do I think these are the 2 best setups sustainably for the next couple of years? Yes. Do I think that means they're going to make the Super Bowl every year? No. So I would say 3. You could probably swing me on 4, but I think that would be very high on my my tolerance list. What say you of the next 5 Super Bowls?
So I think it's an interesting thought argument, right? And I remember very distinctly listening to Jack Nicklaus talk about Tiger Woods when Tiger Woods had 5 and 6 and 7 majors, and saying, well, he will absolutely break all my records if he stays healthy. And I remember thinking, well, what a ridiculous thing to say. Why wouldn't he stay healthy? He's a golfer. Golfers stay healthy. And Tiger Woods didn't stay healthy for a variety of reasons. Number one, his swing was awful on his body, and then he made a swing that was less awful on his body, but it was awful on other parts of his body, and his knees were bad, and then he directed his car, and then
a lot of things can happen in
stuff happens
on the field or on the course and off that can massively impact your ability to be and stay good.
That's right. And then that's where I put the Chiefs as kind of the Tiger Woods of football right now. I think
I agree with
as long as Patrick Mahomes is healthy, that team's going to have a chance, though, pending my next question, and then we'll let it go here. I think the Niners have proven differently that it doesn't matter who plays quarterback for them, such that I would be really interesting to see. They have a crazy decision starting this offseason, really. I mean, I don't think there's weird stuff in the CBA. I don't think he's technically eligible for an extension. I think Purdy's not eligible
until next year, but that is going to be the point that decisions get made, right?
Yeah, well, even this offseason, listen, he may not be eligible for this, that, or the other thing, but he knows what he's worth, and he's sitting there making $800,000. And if we've seen anything, it's that teams can give guys money when they need to or want to. You can sign a guy early, it just can't take into effect for 2 years later, or you can give him workout bonus money or whatever. Are they going to pay this guy based on what they've asked him to do? Or do they bring in another guy in 2? I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting question.
I mean, the interesting thing, it'll be an interesting debate, because then it's like, does he want to go somewhere else, or is he like, no, I'll
be here forever? And right. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's incredibly interesting. And a lot of guys have left that system, or systems like it, for greener pastures and being more appreciated for more money, and ended their careers. But anyhow, the Niners have proven in my mind they can do it regardless of who plays quarterback, it's just wild. So 3 or 4 out of the next 10, I certainly think is reasonable. Listen, Mahomes could, be in a catastrophic, God forbid, car accident on the way to the Super Bowl, and they never go back.
Yeah.
He could decide to hang it up, or, who knows? Well, anything could happen. But on the football evidence, I think that these two teams are the two that make you wonder the most how it ends. It will end. It always ends. Right? It will end. But what's going to make it end? And that's my last question for you today as we end the pod, is which player or coach or factor, function, part of the team is going to, we all know the NFL never stays the same. It will never be the rosters are going to be different next year. The same key cogs are going to be there generally, but you're going to change some out, and you're going to have to let some guys go. Tyreek Hill gone, Kansas City, not there anymore.
Orlando Brown Jr. left, right?
Yep. And so it's, who is the player or the coach or the cog or the part or the phase of the team that will ultimately prove to be the thing that the Niners and the Chiefs, or either one, pick both, what are you going to do, will ultimately end their run as sort of a dynasty-like team?
I mean, I think I'll put the head coaches to one side, because that's so seismic.
Well, they're not going anywhere.
Either of those guys leave or Reed retires, it's just, you're probably done, right? Because it's the continuity is such a big part of what has made those teams successful. And we spoke about it on last week's podcast, where like drafting the same types of guys, scouting the same types of guys, signing the same types of guys. It all plays into a pattern that they're so accommodated, they're so used to, so well accommodated to, that they don't have to change anything. I mean, the obvious answer for the Chiefs is Mahomes, but let's go away from Mahomes because it's too obvious, right?
He's not going anywhere. They'll pay whatever they need to keep him, right?
In terms of what can stop these teams, right, is age.
Yep.
To me, that is going to be the thing that stops them, because it stops every single team. Stop the Patriots, stop the Steelers in the 70s, stop the Packers in the 60s, stop the Cowboys, stop the
Niners the last go around. Yeah,
exactly. Eventually, everyone gets old, and old players don't play as well. So for the Chiefs, the Jenga piece is Travis Kelce right now, because, okay, Rashee Rice looks great, but Rashee Rice looks great because they've got Hall of Fame tight end commanding all the coverage.
Well, and their backup tight ends look great. Because they're not getting the attention Kelce is.
It's like the classic wide receiver 2 gets paid like wide receiver 1 in new team in free agency, and then plays like crap, and everyone goes, well, why is he playing like crap? It's like, well,
doesn't have that guy anymore.
Steelers are a great example of this, right? Complimentary guy gets big money. It turns out you're better as a complimentary guy than you were as wide receiver 1. So Kelce is the obvious one for the Chiefs, and I think because he's older already, that's a problem. I think similarly for the Niners, it'll be. It's going to be aging. All those guys, the only one who's old is Trent Williams, right? And that offensive line has been pretty bad apart from him. He is so good. It's crazy, right? And you can put him on an island against any pass rusher in the entire league.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's 35, I think, now. Left tackles play for a long time, right? If they stay healthy. So maybe he sticks around. Maybe he hangs them up. But the other thing that I would say for the Niners is where you have this ecosystem, and this stat was built out a lot, like, games that Brock Purdy, Trent Williams, and Deebo Samuel have all finished, they've never lost or something like that was the stat I saw a while ago, right? That's great. Trent Williams is old. Deebo Samuel is injury prone, right? I hate that phrase, but he has had a lot of injuries, I'll put it that way, right?
Sure.
You are very, very dependent on a running back, which anyone on earth will tell you is danger. Yeah. And he's had severe injuries. He's missed large amounts of time. And he, so far with the Niners, has stayed healthy. Hope he does.
Only when he's on my fantasy team.
He's a phenomenal player, right? So if you are saying you have to, if the calculus becomes, in order for Brock Purdy to be successful, you have to surround him with all-stars. The all-stars will not stay all-stars forever, and you will not find other all-stars. You just won't, because they are in a unique position in terms of the talent evaluation and where the talent is in their career. That's the key thing for them. Lots of teams have had a lot of great players at once. In the salary cap free agency era, very few get them all at the right time, and the Niners have got them all at the right time. Kittle, Ayuk, Samuel, CMC are all in their exact peak. But in terms of your original question, I would say the two to look out for who are in the realms of getting old and becoming less effective would be Travis Kelce and Trent Williams.
No, well, very well said, Luke. I think Travis Kelce is the most obvious one. I think he's impossible to replace. He's Gronkowski for the Patriots, which I think was just as big a loss as Brady, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's huge.
And, you talk about safety blankets and helping young quarterbacks. Like if they were going to lose Mahomes, had to bring somebody in. Having Kelce there is huge. I think Kelce may be a bigger key than people appreciate. Andy Reid, to your point, if he were to retire, obvious. Trent Williams, I hadn't really thought of. I actually think CMC is the big question mark for them. If you're going to derail the Niners dynasty, I think if you think about the amount of money, the amount of draft picks, the amount of capital they've invested in that running back position, which is really what has become the CMC backfield. If he has another knee, if something goes bad for CMC, they're not going to be able to run the offense the way they run the offense. Deebo Samuel can't just slot back in and be that guy. He's not. You need one more, and that to me, I think is the big wild card for them. Can they keep him on this run of health that he's had since he got there? And even if they do, given the usage rate that guy has, is he playing until he's 35? Is he playing until he's 33? Who knows?
What's happened this year, right? They've, like you say, they've plowed resources in. That Elijah Mitchell ran for 1,000 yards, I think, the season before.
Yep.
And then they make the
went out and trade for CMC for everything but a first. Yep.
Yep. And works out great. He stays healthy. It all looks sunshine and roses. But it's a very different proposition. And listen, they made the NFC Championship game without Brandon Ayuk, without Brock Purdy, without Christian McCaffrey, right? Before with the Mostert, Garoppolo, they still had Kittle and Juszczyk, who's kind of the bit of a, does a bit of everything. But yeah, I think to your point, there are replaceable pieces, and then there are irreplaceable pieces, and I think McCaffrey would certainly qualify as that. And I think Trent Williams is the same, because finding a franchise left tackle, let alone one who's as good as he is, like Hall of Fame talent, is exceptionally hard.
No, it's a great point.
If you want to find people who don't have one, look at all the bad teams, because very few of them have got good left tackles.
No, you're exactly right. And Luke, that'll be the last word for us here on the Half Yard Line. Do check us out on the socials. You have 2 more weeks, ladies and gentlemen. 2 more weeks of the Half Yard Line. We will come to you next week with a Super Bowl preview and probably some other stuff. And then we will wrap the Super Bowl the following week. And that is going to do it for us on the Half Yard Line. So if you wanted to get a piece of Luke for all these terrible things he said about your team, now is the time. Hit us up on the socials with your compliments, your negative, nasty remarks, your pithy comments, whatever you would like to hit us with. Now's the time to do it. The sale is going to end soon. It's been a blast. We've loved doing it. I'm sure on our last episode, we'll say all the warm, fuzzy things, but it is coming to an end. So hit us up on the socials, check us out on YouTube, give us a like, subscribe for posterity. We'd love to see that. It's been a blast doing this with you guys. But until next week, be good.
See ya.
Bye.